You are tuned into Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. Now, let me just disclaim this entire show, and every show that's ever gone before it. It's nice to get misconceptions out of the way, because it's funny, a lot of people seem to listen to podcasts for news, right? And I suppose I can understand that, because it's quite convenient. So say you're driving around, and you're on your commute, or you're on the bus, or you're on the train, or even on the plane, or whatever, and you want to hear the news, and you want to get the WoW info. Well, podcasts are a good way to do that. For instance, the podcast, and indeed the show that's coming up after mine, is WoW Things Considered with Dunco and Cadwellian. Very much a news-based show. They talk a lot about blue posts, a bit of punditry there, quite a lot of news, always good thing. This show is not about news, right? Never has been. Never has been. It's like, if you're familiar with US-based talk radio, then you know exactly what this show is about. If you're familiar with the right-wing commentators on US radio, I'm not going to pass a judgment on, because we know people get upset about that. Dear Lord. If you're familiar with them, they don't do the news. They do punditry. They do commentary. You want news, you say you go to the BBC. You want punditry, you want commentary, you want ranting, you want soapboxing, you want cynicism, you'll get it here in spades. Yes, indeed. And if that's not the kind of thing that you want, then I would recommend you check out our other fine programs on WCRadio.com. Thank you for listening, and goodbye. Epic! Yeah, right. Now, before I go on, allow me to promote something, because that's always a good thing. So, we decided to put together a shirt design for BlizzCon, and it's not really a BlizzCon shirt per se, in that we're not saying, hey, you should all go buy these and wear them at BlizzCon, because BlizzCon's just a few short weeks away now, and it might be a little bit too late for you. However, you never know. It is possible that you might be able to get one, especially if you're living in the US, because the shipping times are quite short. So, we came up with a design. It was specifically Fatty, the lass who won our WoW Idol 2009 contest. She came up with a design based on Three Wolf Moon. If you've seen anything on Three Wolf Moon, you'll know exactly what it is. It's a shirt with a moon on it and three wolves howling at it. And it got all these crazy reviews on Amazon. So, it became an overnight internet craze. We have created, in fact,
not one, but two Jawmanga worms.
In fact, it's called not one, but two Jawmanga Moon. And it's an awesome design. And we're going to be putting it up on our Cafe Press store. You'll be able to get it on basically every possible shirt you can imagine, and every possible size you can imagine, as well as various other merchandise, like steins, mugs, posters, that kind of thing. We're just perfecting the design now, because we want to make sure it's absolutely fantastic quality, and you'll be able to buy that hopefully over the weekend. So go check out our website. We'll put up a front page post once it's available, and you'll also be able to check it out on our Twitter feeds and our Cafe Press store, which is cafepress.com/wearcraft. So yeah, it would be cool to see a few of those over at the BlizzCon. And if you do get the opportunity, you should also go over to elitistjerks.com, because they have a great t-shirt. It's an In the Mountains Elitist Jerks t-shirt in the style of the classic Obama promotional poster. It's very, very good. You should check that one out as well. Very good for the discerning WoW player's wardrobe. Now that we've got the shilling and the corporate stuff out of the way, and the promoting and the endorsing and the Total Biscuit here, and the secret is in the t-shirt, it is time to get on with some content. Now, 180s, U-turns, complete reversals of policy. You would be surprised how many times Blizzard has actually been guilty of this. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about something that's happened recently. Yes, here's the tiny nugget of news that you will get amongst the swirling lava pit of my own personal opinion. Blizzard have allowed you to now create a character on both sides of a PvP server. Now, previously this was not allowed. You could do it on a PvE server, but you couldn't do it on a PvP server. Now, there was, of course, rationale for this, as you would imagine. Basically, every decision in WoW, every design decision, every thing that is there in WoW is there for a reason, however minor that reason may be. Now, from the very start of World of Warcraft, all up until, like, yesterday or whatever, you've not been able to create a Alliance and Horde character on a PvP server. Now, the rationale is twofold. One of these rationales is relevant. One of these rationales is not so relevant. Now, the not so relevant one that is out of date is the idea that you could use a alt on the other side to spy on enemy plans and movements. You know, when they first released the game, when World PvP was at large, and I imagine they were thinking about trying to make World PvP a bigger thing until they just gave up and made Battlegrounds instead, the idea that you'd be able to spy on the other faction's movements would kind of matter. For instance, if anyone actually bothered to defend the city bosses, then knowing exactly what was happening on the other side of a PvP server would be rather helpful. Plus the ability, of course, to sabotage what was going on through misinformation or whatever. Now, it's not a massive deal. It wasn't even from the start, because, of course, all you would need is someone on Ventrilo who happens to be on the other faction, so it wouldn't really make a difference if you could roll or not. But that was a small initial reason. There are games where it matters a little bit more. Like, for instance, I don't know if you can do it in Warhammer on the PvP servers, the R vs R servers. I don't know, but I know you cannot do that on PlanetSide. PlanetSide has a cooldown when you log on to another faction, which means you can't switch back for like another 10 hours or whatever. So you can't keep switching back and forwards to check on enemy plans. So that was the outdated reason. But the major reason, which still endures to this very day, is quite simply this. WoW is populated by petulant, angry, nerd-raging Spurgeon children. Yeah? Whether they be 12 years old, or 24, or 36, or 48. So many man-children all over the place. A lot of very nerd-ragey people. A lot of people that don't really have the best of social skills. A lot of people that just can't keep their anger in check. Which means, of course, that the natural result of ganking on a PvP server would be, if you have the opportunity to do so, logging an alt on the other faction and sending a stream of expletives and horrendous drivel in the direction of the person who just ganked you. Now, that makes sense. It makes sense to have the separation there between the two factions in order for that to happen. And indeed, it is the same reason, of course, why we cannot yell and cannot say to other factions. We have different languages to stop us from doing that. That's the whole point. However, it has been demonstrated that people will go to some very extreme lengths in order to get their messages of hate, their messages of insults, nerd rage, flaming, trolling the other faction through. And you've seen it before, I would imagine, on your server. The idea that certain combinations of letters and numbers can result in sending certain messages over the yell channel. Because you can hear the other faction's yells if you're in the same zone, but of course it's in the wrong language. But that hasn't stopped people, no. Some people have come up with the translations which actually cause the language system to output something that's readable to the other faction. Yes, they will go that far. So tell me exactly. Just ponder on this one. Cogitate it for a little while. Let's hear the cogs whir and the steam flow out of your eardrums. Why exactly Blizzard thought this would be a good idea? Are you serious? I'm sorry, but you're putting way too much trust in your community here. Have you not learned? Maybe it's just because their GMs are bored. Maybe that's it. Maybe there just aren't enough calls for the GMs anymore. Don't worry, they'll increase threefold after this change, because all you're going to be getting is reports of this guy logged onto his alt on the other faction and started calling my mama a whatever. That's what you're going to get. Tons and tons of this. Like 3 times as many bannings. Let me see the suspensions for sending defamatory or inflammatory language to another player go up by like 5 bazillion%. See it happen over the next week. I can guarantee it. Oh, the GMs will be working overtime to deal with the fact that the player base of WoW can't keep their emotions in check. Ah, good lord. Why is this a good idea? Now, here's the thing. This is not the first time that Blizzard has done a bizarre 180. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to try and conclude why exactly they're doing all these silly things. I mean, I could come to a very easy conclusion right now, but now we'll see. Now, one of the first 180s that I can remember, it wasn't the first one, of course, but it was one of the first that I could remember, that was PvE to PvP transfers. Now, when the PCT, the public character transfer, or indeed the paid character transfer, whichever you prefer, take your acronyms however you like, I don't care. Peas, carrots, and tomatoes. When the peas, carrots, and tomatoes system was implemented into World of Warcraft, they specifically said, you cannot transfer from a PvE to a PvP server. The rationale given was simply this: it is easier to level up on a PvE server than it is to level up on a PvP server. Therefore, we are not going to allow people to level up to max level on a PvE server where it is easier and quicker, and then transfer to a PvP server and get the full benefits. It's like, you cannot have your cake and eat it. If you want to be involved in the greater freedom of a PvP server, then you've got to accept that you are going to level up and you are most likely going to get ganked/killed. Now, they 180'd on this, and they 180'd for this specific reason. This is the rationale here. They never gave a specific reason. Yeah. They were just saying, oh, well, we wanted other people to be able to play with their friends. But here's the actual rationale. Yeah? Besides the, oh, we want to make some more money off of PCTs, which is, of course, a valid reason for a company trying to squeeze as much money out of its player base as humanly possible. And we know that, they've been doing that quite a bit lately. The rationale is simply this. The world PvP environment in which the ganking and the craziness was going on simply does not exist anymore. There are far less gankers, there are far less people populating the zones. It is less dangerous now, to the point where it is arguable, it is debatable, it could be argued, that leveling up on a PvE server is really not all that much easier than leveling up on a PvP server, to the point where there's just so little difference that the rationale now fails to hold water anymore. Would I agree with that? Yeah, actually I would, because World PvP's been dead for a very, very long time. I remember the days when, yes, PvP server leveling was hard, and you know what, we relished it. But times have changed. Leveling has got much more boring. Times have changed, and that's how it goes on. So I will give them that. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is another 180 that they did with Wrath of the Lich King. Now, in TBC, they had a badge system, and you're well aware of how the badge system in that works. And there were issues, particularly with the giving out of excessively powerful items for doing instances which were not good enough to justify them. Yeah, they weren't hard enough, they weren't difficulty enough. So it balked up the progression path. Now, with Wrath, they came out with this tiered badge system, and their specific thing that they actually said, paraphrasing here of course, is that we do not want a repeat of the TBC badge debacle. So, of course, the tiered badge system was brought in, and everyone was happy, because the badge system served a good practical purpose. It allowed you to fill in gaps, it allowed you to compensate somewhat for unlucky dice rolls. And that was fine. That was good. I was alright with that. Until, of course, we got to patch 3.2, which we're conveniently now in, whereby they decided to 180 on that. And the justification was, we want more people to see the content. So what we're going to do is we're going to vastly overpower people. Right. There are, of course, other pieces of rationale. We've covered this in great detail, so I'm not going to go too far into it. I mean, we did an entire show on this, for God's sake. The other pieces of rationale, which were mostly player-created, these were not officially stated, is that players were finding it difficult to enter the raid game, and also finding it difficult to get heroics. So, of course, giving a higher tier of badges for running heroics would put people back in heroic dungeons again. Yeah, that's a reasonable piece of rationale. Doesn't mean that it's not ridiculous and cheap, and that they should have thought of other good ways of doing it. By any stretch. That is a 180 that I just see as a cheap cop-out. It's like, we can't design a proper progression path that will actually teach people properly, nor do we understand the principles behind allowing players to go back to older content and actually giving them a good reason to do so that does not involve overpowering people that don't deserve it. And they should look at other games for that. It's ridiculous. What other ones have we got? Well, we had the quick one. Cross-realm battlegrounds are technically impossible. Quote from Gungdil, a former German community manager. Well, we can see why he's a former community manager then. Achievements are important for the progression path. Until we say otherwise. Okay, well, I've never really liked achievements anyway, and campaigned against them, that's fine. And of course, the other one would be 2v2 is an important part of the arena experience. Until we realise that our silly balancing has not worked. Thereby, we're just gonna, disqualify 2v2 as a valid form of arena progression. Conclusion. 180s. 180s are invariably gonna happen at some point. But what concerns me more than anything is that WoW is now a very old game, yeah, in relative terms. It's about 5 years old. Which means that the original guys, a lot of them aren't working on it anymore, and that's a problem, because sometimes you get the new guys come in, they have a different vision for the game, and they take the game in the wrong direction, and they forget the wisdom of their forefathers. And the wisdom of their forefathers is what made such a classic MMORPG to begin with. Forget that, and oh, you are in trouble. You really are. Forget those principles. You are in the shiz, as it were. You break what made the game good in the first place. My name is Total Biscuit, you're listening to Blue Please here on WoW Radio. I've got some music for you, and I'll be back after the break to tell you about the amazing Flat Ulduar. Yes, quite. Enjoy.